Muy buenas tardes a todos. Les habla Manuel Frau Ramos, miembro de la Junta de Directores de la Biblioteca Pública de Holyoke, junto a María Pagán, la directora de la Biblioteca Pública de Holyoke. A nombre de la Biblioteca Pública de Holyoke, bienvenidos todos y todas. Hoy, 6 de octubre del 2021, vamos a hacer una presentación de un documental sobre la vida de Orlando Isaza, que mucha gente lo conoce en esta región por los diferentes cargos que tuvo y la participación política. Este evento se da, gracias a Dios, por el auspicio del Instituto Colombiano Jaime Isaza Cadavid, Holyoke Public Library Corporation, City of Holyoke, Springfield Technical Community College y Latin American Library. Y le vamos a presentar a nuestro amigo y profesor Miguel Arce, que hará la introducción de los miembros que participaron en este proyecto. Miguel.
Good evening. Thank you for participating this evening. I think it's most appropriate that the library in Holyoke has decided to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month today in the form of having this presentation. Also, I think it's very timely given the fact that there are so many situations right at our border right now about refugees and immigrants. So I think that the topic is very timely. I'd like to introduce Orlando Isaza, but before I do, I'd like to give a special thanks to Maria Pagán, who's worked so hard. She's always in the background. She never takes credit for anything, but clearly the fact that we have a translator, that this is being recorded, speaks volumes to the fact that Maria has always been in the background helping out. So I'd like to introduce Orlando Isaza, who was born in Colombia, which is high in the Andes, in a pretty remote area. And he was born to a devout but humble Catholic family. And his childhood was marked with poverty and deprivation. And it was poverty and deprivation in the external sense, as well as his own situation when he was growing up. He viewed his own situation and decided to pursue nonviolence and social justice. He was awarded one of only 50 people that came out of South America, and he was awarded something called the Latin American Scholarship Program of American Universities. He was a Wynn Scholar at Brandeis University and pursued undergraduate and graduate studies in sociology, social welfare, social planning, social policy, and sociology of healthcare. He earned his master's degree in social work at the University of Connecticut. Since he was granted the scholarship to study abroad, he's recognized and taken advantage of the opportunities that were afforded to him. And he's worked tirelessly for 55 years to enhance the well-being of all peoples and improve the quality of life in our American society. He's been an advisor to many state governors. I can name 4 right at the top of my head that he was an advisor to: secretaries of health, secretaries of housing, economic development, education, and he's also been advisors to various commissioners, mayors, and on matters of healthcare, housing, and education. He's served as a consultant for the federal government, as a volunteer, and as a paid employee. And he's worked for many not-for-profit organizations, always as a philanthropist. He's held several managerial positions in both private and public organizations. He retired as the area director of the Massachusetts Department of Transitional Assistance, and later became the Dean of Social Sciences and a special assistant to the president at Holyoke Community College. He's received so many awards that it would be impossible to list them all. But two that I would identify is he received an honorary degree. It's called an honoris causa doctorate in humane letters from the Elms College. And he also received the highest award by the National Associations of Social Workers in Massachusetts with their annual award for the greatest contribution to social policy and social change. He's received numerous state Senate and state House of Representatives citations and for his numerous contributions. So I'll turn it over to Orlando to introduce the producer of the film that we're going to watch tonight.
Before we move forward, if anyone needs translation, si alguien necesita traducción, tenemos los servicios aquí. In case.
Disculpe, no puede explicar muy bien en español por este razón, solamente estoy hablando en inglés, pero hay un hombre aquí que puede ayudar a personas.
Go ahead. ¿Te quieres poner aquí?
I didn't expect all that about me. As we see the documentary, I hope to see it as a kind of an example, not really of me, but of the experience of an immigrant in the United States. And I like to focus on the kind of the unique obstacles and difficulties of being an immigrant, and also the triumph and victories of becoming a citizen in this country after having gone through the process of being an immigrant. With me today is Mario Agudelo. Mario Agudelo is a well-recognized documentarist in Colombia. He's a professor at the Colombian Technological Institute Jaime Isaza in Medellin. He is the producer and director of many documentaries. I have seen quite a few of them. I guess the one that really sticks in my mind is one that is quite beautiful about the last years in the papacy of Pope John Paul, which was quite moving. The emphasis of that documentary is about the Pope's ecumenical kind of desire to unite all the religions in Israel and in Jerusalem. Mario is an old friend. We used to live actually next door. We were both his family and my family were recipients of a kind of an assistance from the government of Colombia and the Alliance for Progress and the Peace Corps, which together developed this housing project where we both resided for many years, although he lived there much longer than I did, because when we moved there, it was in 1964. And I quickly, within 1 year, I came to the United States in June of 1965. I guess I don't have much more to say about Jaime, right? About my friend here, whose name I just mixed. Except to say that he's among my very, very, very best friends in this world. And I have a great admiration and respect for him as a person and as a professional. He also has been a professor of philosophy and theology in the past. So he's got a strong background that, you know, it would be too long to repeat here and make this program far too long.
So do we want to show the film?
Now we go.
So now we'll show the film.
Yeah, okay.
Preguntas, questions, comments.
How do you think your childhood impacted your decision to be a warrior for social justice?
I don't know that we heard. Did people hear the question?
No.
No.
Repeat.
Do it again.
I'll speak loud so everyone can hear me. I apologize. I said, how did his childhood impact his decision to be so dedicated to improving the quality of life for people?
Well, I just being in that condition of deprivation and in the midst of a lot of violence with occasional but too common a feeling of hunger, I always felt that I didn't deserve that and that no human being deserved that. And that therefore I should dedicate my efforts in whatever way I could to make sure that what I went through, no other human being would have to go through. And so I dedicated my life to learning about how to do that. And that was the beginning of my studies and various employment opportunities, and whatever work I have done has been to try to help people as a way to kind of redeem myself, to do for others what I wish in those days someone would have done for me.
Mario, how do you know? ¿Cuál fue tu motivo para hacer un documental sobre tu hijo Orlando?
Bueno, yo creo que cuando un documentalista elige un tema, ese tema en cierta forma tiene algo que ver con su vida. Y fue lo que pasó. Que una vez conocí un poquitico más la historia de Orlando, vi o sentí que había una identificación. Yo vengo también de un pueblo pequeño en Antioquia, y en los comienzos también de nuestra familia nosotros andábamos como gitanos. Mi papá era maestro de escuela y había una época de mucha violencia, y por esa violencia nos teníamos que estar trasladando de pueblo en pueblo porque lo amenazaban continuamente. Esa era la violencia de los finales de 40 y de los 50. La división entre conservadores y liberales era a muerte. Y después nos pasamos a Medellín y experimenté estando en la zona urbana, porque no es lo mismo la vida en un pueblo muy conectado con el campo a llegar a la ciudad. Se siente uno realmente, por un lado, un poquitico discriminado también, y uno no entiende la cultura a la cual llega. Entonces yo sentía que el paso de Orlando, de Abejorral a Medellín, pues era la misma situación que yo había vivido, y al barrio que llegó él era un barrio muy similar al que yo llegué también en Medellín. Y ya después, pues, toda la vivencia de él me pareció también que se identificaba con la mía. No solo por las situaciones económicas limitadas en las cuales vivíamos, sino también porque interiormente también había una cantidad de conflictos. ¿Sí? O sea, no era solamente el problema económico. El problema principal, creo yo, del inmigrante o del inmigrante es el problema de la soledad, el problema de la inconexión, pues de no estar conectado, de sentirse separado del resto. De pronto estoy hablando mucho.
No, déjame, yo digo algo de eso en inglés porque ya se está haciendo largo, pero bueno. So the question was about how he came to do this documentary about my life. And he basically saying that he felt there was some affinity between my experience and his experience. He came from a poor family as well, semi-rural, feeling the extreme moments of fear and violence in Colombia. His family moved around from place to place. And then he went on to say that he also felt there was an affinity in the experience, not just in the facing the kind of status of violence, but also in the feelings of isolation felt by the immigrant in coming to a new place where you were not known, you were not respected, you were sometimes disrespected, and you were not accepted. So he was, when I interrupted him, he was talking about even within Colombia as a migrant from one place to another during those moments of violence, he assumed some of the feelings that I had in integrating to this new society were very similar to his own experience.
Claro está que también otra cosa que me motivó mucho es que encontraba un proceso o una vida o una historia compleja, muy contrastante. O sea, en Orlando veía yo, en la historia de Orlando veía que se daban demasiadas situaciones contrastantes.
He found in kind of experience in my own life a lot of conflicts, a lot of complexity that he wanted to explore.
Por ejemplo, venir de una familia con cierto abolengo, con cierto reconocimiento a nivel de historia, como también a nivel de económico, a nivel también de cultura.
As an example, just the contrast of my having come from a kind of a distinguished family, not only culturally, but also economically, and finding my immediate family in such desperate situations, that kind of contrast he found very attractive in terms of what he wanted to explore.
Y a pesar de esa situación, de venir de una familia de abolengo, pasar por esa situación de extrema pobreza, de limitación económica fuerte. Ese es el contraste.
Yeah, just the contrast of, again, that kind of history in the family of kind of cultural tradition as well as wealth, and then my immediate family in desperate poverty. You have a question?
Well, not really a question, but what I learned from you is that.
By the way, this is my wife, Milagro, so I have to express my gratitude. Talking about an immigrant, I need to express my gratitude to family as an anchor in this country that allowed me to develop and contribute in any way I can. So thank you. Go ahead.
You arrived in this country. You came from Colombia with a very rich life experience. I see all the difficulties that you went through as a way to enrich your life. And you came here in a moment that so many things were happening. So many things were changing. It was like the perfect time for you to start the new horizons that you directed your life with, like serving the community, like creating, facilitating, the improvement of life in the community. I wanted to say a little bit more of how all that energy moved you into that direction.
I guess this is also an opportunity for me to say that I don't think I am in any way a typical immigrant. I think there are issues related to the condition of being an immigrant that we could generalize about. A sense of being the other and being treated as the other, often with disrespect and sometimes with humiliation, and certainly a sense of separation and a difficulty in integrating yourself to a new society. So I went through all of that, and I think all immigrants go through all of that. But I feel blessed. I was, if you think of immigration as essentially two forces, one that pushes people to come to another country like the United States, and another one that attracts you to the United States. I am the ones who were attracted, though I came under kind of interesting circumstances by the scholarship that I got. But I was not one of the ones that were pushed by extreme violence, by death, by desperation. I'm not of the type of Haitians trying to come into this country today, or the people from Central America trying to come to this country today due to the violence and just desperation. There's no way of saying it. So yeah, I came at a moment in history in this country where there was a lot of energy about change. I mean, it was the women's liberation, it was the Black Panthers, it was human rights, it was civil rights, it was all the movements of the 60s. I was fortunate actually to be immersed in every one of those movements in one way or another. And that provided me tremendous energy. I guess I was highly motivated to be a participant on all those movements at the time that I wouldn't have had a chance of participating in Colombia. There was no way. So I am blessed by the opportunities that this country has afforded me. I am blessed by the opportunities to have all the aid and support that I have gotten over the years, and all the mentorship and all the guidance and all the pushing that I have gotten from so many friends and professors at Brandeis University, I mean, that I remember so dearly, whom I love so much, and who, I mean, going back to the documentary, which is real interesting, I really meant it. I was at a moment when I went to that English class with Professor Mueller, when I was about to be kicked out of the university. I don't think I would have survived there. But somehow or other, that man was able to tell me, forget about all the negativities that are going on around you. I believe in you. That alone was, for me, a palliative. It was something that I tell people, in a way, saved my being in this country. I would have probably returned to Colombia had not had that kind of love and support from a single human being who probably never realized that what he was doing and saying to me would transform my life. So that lesson alone, for me, was extraordinarily significant. To be able to just give people support that might change their lives without any effort on my side. There's no effort for me to say, you're a great man, Manuel. But at a particular moment in life, in his context, that might be a transformative experience for him. So that was one of the lessons for me in this experience.
We have a question from our audience online. So,
Thank you. I wanted to ask if the young boy in the movie were there old pictures of you, or this is an actor?
It's a good question. It's a good question. And Mario might want to talk about that. I think that's one of the very interesting things about this documentary. The only comment I want to make about that before he speaks is that my criticism of that little scene with that young man as an actor was that he had shoes on and I didn't have shoes on.
Oh,
when that happened. But go ahead, Mario. Oh, sabes la pregunta, ¿no?
No alcancé a terminar.
Que si el joven que me representaba cuando
Sí,
es
sí.
niño era un actor o era yo.
Sí, sí. Era un actor, lógicamente, era un actor. Me tomé ¿cómo diríamos nosotros?
Una libertad.
Una libertad, y fue de hacer puesta en escena con actores, porque era muy difícil dar a entender toda esa situación emocional, toda esa situación social, si no se recreaba también un poquitico. Y afortunadamente los actores que conseguimos fueron actores que tenían cierta semejanza en muchas cosas al Orlando pequeño o al Orlando adolescente.
Inglés. So he's saying that as a documentarist, he took the liberty of introducing acting into the documentary, which is kind of risky actually. But he found in Abajo these young people whom he thought actually had very similar experiences to mine. So in that sense, he felt more comfortable putting them on scene, also to kind of be able to convey with an actor the complexity of the time and the circumstances under which I went through when I was a child. Go ahead. No te oigo nada.
The cultural limbo that you referred to, has it changed? Has it evolved?
Excellent.
Have you seen some?
It's a good question. For those online who might not have heard this in its entirety, she's asking if I still feel like I am in a cultural limbo. In the film, I say that I have always felt that I live in a cultural limbo. No, that really hasn't changed. I feel very comfortable being a citizen of the United States, and I feel like I actually interact and convey myself very well, and I understand what goes on in a kind of a 99% of the way, if I may just put it that way. But it's never quite home. But when I go to Colombia, I feel the same way. You know, I feel a lot of things have changed, that given my experience in the US, they are not quite comfortable anymore. Just I'll give you an example. One of the most exciting things about my when I came to the United States was a feeling of security and predictability that I never felt while I was in Colombia. I mean, in Colombia, security and predictability just are not part of the game. I mean, anything can go berserk at any moment. Here, I felt that sense of security. But there are other things that in this culture, I kind of miss. I mean, there is, if I can come up with an example, I think the sense of connection in Colombia and Latin America is we're kind of closer to each other, we're a little more intimate. Sociologists, for example, argue that this may not be the case anymore. I used to say this some 20, 30 years ago, that the safe distance in this country between two people before they feel a sense of danger or sexuality is about 24 inches or so. In Latin America and Colombia, it's more like 18 inches. So you can come closer without feeling invaded or without invading other people. So there are things that I still miss of that cultural background in Colombia. But I must say, although neither of those two places feel like home, both places feel like home. It's the paradox. Any more questions, comments?
Yes, there's one question online, so I am bringing Okay, thanks. And Jorge wants to ask directly.
Huh?
Your friend Jorge. That's,
Say that.
yeah, your friend Jorge.
Jorge Mesmer? How do I know that? Oh, Jorge. That's a dear friend.
Oh,
So what's he asking?
Okay, so the question is, hola Orlando, what do you consider were the greatest barriers or challenges other than the language that you had to face because of being Hispanic when you first came to the US?
That's a good question. Other than the language, I'll say that the language was so important. I mean, something that I said in the film is that as a winner of that scholarship and as one who academically was kind of superior, though not in my conduct, I always felt like I was intelligent, bright, and the lack of the ability to speak correctly and fluently, I really began to feel like I was a fraud, like I was stupid. So I don't want to minimize the importance of the language. But Jorge is asking about what in addition to that. I must say it was the racial thing. It was the sense that although while in Colombia, that didn't matter at all. I never felt like there was any kind of racial background of any kind. I was just there. Here, it became very clear very quickly that I was perceived as a person of color. And that came with a sense of, I'm going to say, of disrespect, a sense of belittling me and questioning my dignity and my integrity. Now, because I say that, I will also say that I think part of the experience of the immigrant is that because of all of those barriers, linguistic and cultural and economic and so on and so forth, one feels the need to reinvent oneself. One has to make everybody else know that you are a valuable person, that you are deserving of dignity, that you are a good person. And interestingly enough, as I think about this, I'll say it again, all the experiences of immigrants like myself have really no comparison with the experience of people who are undocumented. People like myself need to present ourselves, to say, here I am, this is who I am, and I'm a good person. You may not think I am, but I am. And I show you. That is very different than the experience of the undocumented. The undocumented wants to hide, needs to hide, lives in constant fear, lives como en una jaula, as in a cell, as in a jail, and that needs to be said. So I think that feeling of alienation by virtue of what being of a different race, as I said in the documentary, I mean, in those days, everywhere I went, there was a question, white or black? All those documents, every document said black or white. And I would look at that and wait, I don't know what they mean by this. I'm brown. So I would write on those documents, brown, you know, but that difference, I never quite understood, but very quickly became a major factor of my experience, being seen as a brown person. As I said in the documentary, while in Boston for 20 years or so, it became very quickly clear to me that I was a Puerto Rican to the outside world. And what did that mean? That means that meant that you were not quite at a par with the rest of us. You were an outsider. You were not quite welcome. And that feeling of not being quite welcome was always very clear to me. Any other question, comment, concern?
So how do you reconcile if it's not welcome and then feel comfortable? Said now you feel comfortable.
Well, you ask very hard questions. I don't know if my children remember, but I used to tell them at some point that in this country, because who we are, brown people, immigrants and the children of immigrants, you need to be golden to look silver, to look like silver. So I guess the way for me to feel really comfortable is to finally have gotten a sense that I have done some good, that in some ways I have excelled. People may not recognize that, and some people do, but within myself, I feel like I don't really care what people think about me anymore. It's basically that. Another way that I often put it is that I really don't care whether you like me or don't like me. What I do care about is that you treat me well. So your prejudice, to me, is irrelevant, and somehow or other, that's natural, that's human. But you better treat me well. And I feel like over the decades, I have gained the right to be treated well.
Yo creo que también sería bueno agregar ahí esto, y es de que tanto el que vive acá como el que llegan con, pues el que está acá tiene sus prejuicios y el que llega también tiene sus prejuicios. Yo, por ejemplo, venía con una cantidad de prejuicios. Vengo todavía, porque todavía hay algunos prejuicios, porque no hay conocimiento profundo. Y cuando no hay conocimiento, entonces hay prejuicios. Entonces lo mismo pasa también con la persona que llega acá.
But let me translate because that's a good point. He's saying that it is important to recognize that on both sides, the one who comes and the one who is here already, there are prejudices on both sides. And there are prejudices because there is no sufficient knowledge. And that is in fact sufficient knowledge what begins to erode those prejudices. And that's a very important point to be made. That's it? You finished? Okay. Is this coming to an end?
On behalf of the Holyoke Public Library, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And also, if you want to continue this conversation, both invitados, we are going to have a presentation tomorrow at the new house of the Hispanic American Library at the Springfield Union Station over there at 7.
Yeah, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's free. It's a new place, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well,
so there is another presentation tomorrow at 7 o'clock at the Hispanic American Library at Union Station in Springfield, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
So thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you.